Lucie Bacon. I'm a French geographer and cartographer, and I am a member of a Euro-African network named Migrant. About what is radical cartography. Radical cartography is a way of thinking about cartography. It is a dissident current of so-called conventional cartography. Where traditional cartography claims the status of an exact science, radical cartography claims a subjective nature. It assumes and asserts that a map is never neutral and a map is not an objective representation of the world. More concretely, radical cartography is a diverse collection of maps that show a different vision of the world, a different interpretation of reality from that conveyed by traditional maps. Radical cartography tackles other subjects dealing with lesser known themes. It focuses also on marginalized perspectives and it uses other data, it mobilized other sources. And it also represents the word in a different way from conventional cartography. Radical cartography plays a lot, not always, but often, with the shapes and colors, trying out new semiological configurations, hijacking the codes, rules, and conventions of traditional cartography. And I think radical cartography is a formidable tool of struggle for denouncing, producing, and disseminating a counter-narrative to the hegemonic discourse of the moment and encouraging collective decision-making as well. What impact can conventional maps have on how societies understand migrant journeys? I would say that conventional cartographies of migrations are those we see, for example, in the media or in reports by international organizations or even in school textbooks. And most of these maps say nothing about the migratory journey. The vast majority of these maps circulating represents migration routes, for example, the Balkan route or the Mediterranean route, and the number of migrants intercepted by those in charge of surveillance and control, such as Frontex, for example. And these maps, I think, are serious because they exaggerate and misinform. The geographical framework is always centered on Europe, and we can see big arrows from south to north or huge circles at the border of the European Union. And I think these maps are perfect for feeding the theory of invasion, or even worse, the theory of the great replacement. And by the way, they are dehumanizing maps. They make us completely forget that there are men, women, and children behind those arrows. There are a few rare maps, conventional maps, showing migratory journeys, but these are very basic. And in reality, it's not the journey that is represented, but the itinerary. There's a background map showing the countries crossed, a line representing the route, and some dots representing the stopover points. But in my opinion, the dehumanizing effects of these maps are less pronounced than those previously mentioned. However, they don't tell the whole story and leave the shadows elements that are essential to understand migration. The reader won't know that the journey represented can take days, months, or even years. These maps also usually omit the difficulties encountered and their nature, and therefore they tend to conceal to the readers the harmful and deadly political context or the control mechanism that migrants have to face. Also, the diversity and multiplicity of resources mobilized by migrants to build their journey in this hostile context is also overlooked. In fact, conventional cartography say nothing about migrants' experiences, people experiences, and I believe that if we want to understand the phenomenon of migration and the men, women, and children behind it, we need to give the reader access to their experience, to establish a closeness and discover migration not as a confrontation with the reality of the other, but as an experience that you can appropriate. I will finish with some references because I'm not the only one thinking about this subject. So on the subject of the radical cartography, to find out more, I highly recommend reading Cartographie radicale exploration by the historian Neftis Ver and the cartographer Philippe Rekasevitz. And also, This Is Not an Atlas, the book named This Is Not an Atlas by the collective Orangotango. And on the subject of migration specifically, I highly recommend reading the Four Atlas of Migration in Europe, edited by the network Migrinter, a network of scientists and activists to which I belong, and that produce many radical maps about migration policies, migratory control tools, and migrants' journey. Thank you.